Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Cricket Unfiltered. It is Mad Manners. Oh boy, let's fucking go. Australia have been eliminated from the T20 World Cup. It is official after two diabolical performances against Afghanistan and then India. Australia bow out after, in the most dramatic circumstances, Afghanistan beat Bangladesh in the final group game, therefore officially knocking Australia out. But boy, I think I've aged about maybe 5 or 10 years watching that Afghanistan v Bangladesh game. It was a seesawing, dramatic contest. At stages, every team thought they had a chance of going through to the World Cup semi-final. Bangladesh looked like they might chase down the target in enough overs to leapfrog both teams. Afghanistan looked like they could win. Australia, therefore, looked like they might go through because Bangladesh would just win, but not win quick enough. It was the most dramatic of cricket matches. Afghanistan batted first, made 5 for 115 in 20 overs, and then in reply, Bangladesh were all out for 105. But that doesn't tell the full story, and it was just such a seesawing afternoon of emotions. At times, I thought Australia would actually get a second chance at this World Cup, and I was so hopeful that we would actually get a crack at South Africa when Bangladesh looked like they were going to win the game. At one stage, Bangladesh decided not to go for the run rate win, which would have seen them go into the semi-final. They had to chase the target in 12.1 overs. They actually put the head down and wanted to go for the consolation win, which some people said, oh, maybe that wasn't the right approach. I think the run rate win did become pretty unlikely at one stage, and therefore, if Bangladesh want to get a hard-fought World Cup win, they deserve it, and there's no shame in that, playing for pride. So, anyway, but after that, for the next couple of hours, there were rain interruptions at some stages. Bangladesh should be ahead on DLS. At some stage, Afghanistan would be ahead as they were taking wickets. They would go off for short breaks and then come back on. All the while, different equations are being thrown out there. But I think the moment that will live on, maybe in infamy, but live on forever, was Gulbuddin Naib, who took a dive. There's no other way to say it. I mean, I thought, I'm not talking about a football or a soccer game. I'm talking about a cricket game. Basically, Afghanistan was slightly ahead on the DLS. The rain was starting to come down, and Jonathan Trott yelled out, who is the Afghanistan coach, yelled out, slow down. So if the rain came, therefore, and they went off, Afghanistan would win the game. But what happened was Gulbuddin took it to the extreme. And I think when Jonathan Trott was saying slow down, he means change the field, slow it down as much as possible, and maybe have a chat between the bowler and the wicketkeeper, whatever you can do. But Gulbuddin took it to the extreme and just, as the bowler was coming in, just took a dive at first slip and pretended basically that he had a cramp or an injury, because he came back and he was bowling not long after. It didn't end up mattering because the game was pretty much played out. They lost 1 over in the chase, but still not great. Certainly that goes too far with the spirit of the game. And I think that's, going to be the iconic moment from this game. But Afghanistan win. They go through to the World Cup semi-final. They will play South Africa. And in the other semi-final, we have England versus India. And look, if I'm being honest, Australia didn't deserve to be in the semi-final. Although they were excellent in the group stage, when it really mattered in the Super 8s, when Australia was, really under pressure, when it mattered most, this team went missing. And it's not often you can say that about this Australian team. They win the 50-over World Cup. They win the Test Championship. They retain the Ashes despite not winning the Ashes. But I think if you just look at, say, the T20 team in isolation, that's probably the best way to go. And, they have not made it through to the semi-finals, and they didn't make it through to the semi-finals of the last T20 World Cup. So, I think after the win in 2021, where Australia won the T20 World Cup in the Emirates, in the UAE, that, there was a lot of faith put in the majority excuse me, the majority of this team, and it hasn't really changed. Got him. Need a drink of water here. I'm so emotional after being eliminated from a World Cup. And, Australians aren't used to this. I mean, let's be honest. It happens more in T20 World Cups, but generally Australians, are used to being at a World Cup at the business end of the tournament. But just specifically on the T20 World Cup, since our win in 2021, this team has been a disaster. And there's no other way of looking at it. You can't sugarcoat it any more than that. The selectors and the coaches have got a lot right, but maybe they left it too long to retool this team. And, teams age out and you're not quite sure when they're going to age out, but this team aged out, and maybe they aged out at the last T20 World Cup in a lot of ways. But, the output at the business end of this tournament was not good enough. And the middle order was no good. And maybe the top order, maybe David Warner did play on one tournament too long. He started well, and Australia started this tournament well. But, from that game against Afghanistan, it was an unmitigated disaster. And that performance against Afghanistan is concerning because Australia got their tactics wrong, their performance was bad, and if anything shows the way a team traveling, it's fielding, and Australia's fielding was atrocious. And I think I said earlier in the tournament that I thought Australia were playing so well that they would only be beaten if they came up against a team that had a good day. But in the end, Australia actually didn't play well. I mean, that's just the cold, hard facts. Afghanistan played well against us, their opening batters, but I don't think we forced them to play as well as they should have. Against India, we didn't catch well again, letting Hardik Pandya off. So, there's been, this epidemic of, poor fielding. Our middle order of Stoinis, David and Wade, it didn't really fire at the back half of the competition when you really needed them to ice a couple of chasers. Maxwell only had one good game really against Afghanistan, and apart from that, his output was pretty low. But overall, I mean, the tactics against Afghanistan were all wrong. Mitchell Starc didn't play, and we decided to bowl first on a pitch we should have batted. And, that was the sort of fork in the road moment in this tournament. Australia had their destiny in their own hands. They beat Afghanistan. They go through to the semi-finals, and they completely whiffed on it. And, you look at the last T20 World Cup in Australia. Australia didn't make the semi-finals. They played pretty poorly especially in the first game against New Zealand, where they lost by 100 runs or so, and therefore effectively ended their tournament in the first game. So, this team has just not been able to get it together at T20 World Cup since that famous victory in 2021. There's been a lot of, I guess, a lot of things come out of the camp that during the tournament when it started about how close this team is and how there's such a great environment and how they all, love being together. And, I wouldn't accuse the guys of, not working hard or not being passionate about playing for Australia. They all put in their best, but maybe it was missing that hard edge in this tournament, especially as it got down to the business end, because, I sort of think those environments, really, when they get put under the real furnace of pressure is when you really see how they're going to cope. And I just felt in that Afghanistan game, I don't know why you would go so radically different to your other tactics where you play Mitchell Starc and no chasing team had won at that venue and you win the toss and bowl. I don't know how you arrive at those decisions. And, from there, it just meant that the World Cup was, an uphill battle from there. And, it's not like Australians to falter in those big games. But yeah, the fielding was concerning. Australia's catching percentage in the Super 8s was the worst of any team, and that is just very un-Australian. Josh Hazlewood said after the loss to India that, because of the tight schedule, they haven't had a chance to do a lot of fielding training. And they are good fielders, but, that is, I guess, an indication that maybe things just are a little sloppy. Like, I'm all for empowering people and giving them personal space and freedom and these professional athletes that know what they're doing and are And, a lot of these players have been professionals for 10, 15, 20 years. They don't need to be babysat, but you do need someone to challenge you. Do need someone to push you. You do need to be a little uncomfortable at times. And, if it is doing a fielding practice you might not think you need, well, maybe that just gives you that little edge over your opponents. I don't know, but, this tournament, and if you put it together with our last T20 World Cup, it's an abject failure and it's disappointing. After winning it in 2021, I thought Australia would really challenge at T20 World Cups, and they just haven't been able to. And, we didn't deserve to go through. So, I congratulate Afghanistan in going through. They certainly played way better than Australia did in the Super 8s. And I just think the team maybe aged out a little bit. Maybe Josh Inglis should have been the keeper instead of Matt Wade. And you all know I'm the biggest Matt Wade fan. But, maybe it was just one tournament too far for this group because, this is an unmitigated disaster. Not to be in the semi-finals, for Afghanistan to be there in Australia's place. I mean, this will definitely be the wake-up call that the team needs. I mean, they will have to turn the page now. I think we'll see a lot of these Australian players phase out of the T20 side. Stoinis, I mean, I shouldn't pick him out. He had a very good start to the T20 World Cup, but as the tournament's gone on, he's sort of fallen away. And when we really needed him, he wasn't able to pull the rabbit out of a hat, so to speak. But, I think a lot of these players will move on. Warner, definitely. Maxwell, I think. I know he's been a great T20 player for Australia, but will he be there at the next T20 World Cup? I'm not sure he will be. And therefore, if he's not, he'll probably need to move on. Stoinis definitely will. I think it's time to bring in younger all-rounders. Inglis for Wade's a no-brainer. And then you look at the fast bowlers. Well, they performed pretty well throughout the tournament. They all copped a little bit of heat at some stages, but you definitely see some younger quicks coming in there. So, this is a generational shift in the Australian side, but, it's been a very disappointing performance. And, I was sort of thinking, were there the danger sides? And I did flag a couple of times that I was a bit concerned about how, casual the feeling was and the vibes coming out of the camp. And look, I think the danger is when it's like that. As I said, when it shifts and the pressure's suddenly on, it can be a bit jarring. And the team looked a bit frazzled. That Mitch Marsh catch off Hardik Pandya was an absolute sit-up. And that, allowed India to get another 20 runs and may be the difference between a win or a loss for Australia. And, to drop 5 catches against Scotland, 5 catches against Afghanistan. I mean, these are things that the Australian team is not known for doing. And for it to happen at the business end of the tournament, look, I don't think there'll be wholesale sackings or anything like that. I think McDonald's place in the coaching setup's fine and all that stuff. But it is a big. It's a fuck up. There's no other way of putting it. I mean, as I said, that game against Afghanistan, probably one of the worst days for Australian limited over cricket in its history. And it's not losing to Afghanistan, it's the way we lost and what it did to our World Cup campaign. And, the ignominy of having to sit through that Afghanistan-Bangladesh game, well, as a fan, was pretty tough. But can you imagine the Australian team sitting in their hotel till, almost 2 a.m. local time, waiting to see whether it was off home, off to holiday somewhere, or off to play a semi-final against South Africa. I'll tell you one team who'll be really happy that they're not playing Australia. That is South Africa. They will be very, very happy that they get to play Afghanistan. Not that I don't think Afghanistan can't beat South Africa, but we all know the hoodoo that Australia has over South Africa in World Cup. So a huge relief for them. But, you can imagine the emotions the Australian team went through because, again, the curious thing is I have absolutely savaged this team in the last 15 minutes, but I still believe had Bangladesh pulled off a win, and they were so close to doing it, Lytton Darts was almost an Australian hero. Had they done it, Australia would have been in a World Cup semi-final, and then, I do think we were a decent chance at winning 2-2 because there's a lot of match winners in that Australian team, and you get them against South Africa, and then a bit like we saw in the 50 over World Cup, you get through to a final, anything can happen. But in the end, they didn't deserve to be there, and the team whiffed on when they had the chance in their own hands, and they didn't deserve it. But again, so I guess what I'm saying is this team has quite a few credits in the bank, just overall as a playing group. They've won a lot of things. But if you look at the T20 team in isolation, the last two World Cups have been poor. And yeah, this team, as I said, the T20 team and the 50 over team now will probably be sort of revamped. And I think it will be hypocritical for me to say too much about the selection of this squad, other than you never know when it's going to age out. Maybe Inglis was worth a go, bringing him in for Wade at some points in the tournament. I mean, Wade didn't get many opportunities, but he also didn't look great in the chances he did get. So maybe you could have made that call. But Jake Fraser McGurk was a player that was talked about as someone that could have been in this squad. In hindsight, should Australia have made some huge calls and dropped some big names for this tournament? Yes. I mean, in hindsight, everything is easy in hindsight, but yes, maybe we weren't ruthless enough. And it happened in the last home World Cup where we carried Aaron Finch through it. It's happened, it's happened in the past. But look, as I said, it's a tough one because the T20 side was playing pretty well in between World Cups, so they did have some good performances there, but they certainly got it wrong. And yeah, I think the fielding was the thing that was the most alarming. But middle order batting didn't come well, and that game against India, Australia played a bit better, but they came up against a rampaging Rohit Sharma. They didn't field well again, especially that catch by Marsh. And they left themselves a really stiff task of having to beat India, who are a great team, and they smelt blood in the water, and they took it. I don't know if that's the right metaphor, for it, but whatever they did, they took advantage of Australia when they were down. And yeah, what are the ramifications of this loss? Well, broadly speaking, I think it does provide a sobering reality to this current Australian setup. And, in the same way that players always seek to improve, I do think this needs to be a wake-up call to the coaching staff that maybe you do need to push a bit harder and you do need to demand a bit more. And I'm sorry, but Australia have a lot of credits in the bank, but also I think there is the reality that when Australia is really under the most pressure, they have crumbled, and so I guess, what can the coach do to, instill a bit more of a hard edge to the team? And what I mean by that, where it hasn't happened, well, we didn't win in India last year. We didn't win a test series there. We approached the whole thing pretty poorly. In the Ashes, our tactics were wrong. So look, I'm getting into different formats, but I think, I think the ramifications, if I'm Andrew McDonald, I'm thinking, okay, am I really doing exactly what's best for this team by giving them this free hand? And you only have to hear Usman Khawaja, crap on about it, how basically the team, they don't run itself. Like I'm not trying to, I know Andrew McDonald is a very good cricket coach, but he gives them a lot of room to manage their own games. And I think hopefully he takes some stock from this and thinks, well, basically, I've been coach, and in two World Cups, in two T20 World Cups, we haven't made the semi-finals. In one 50 over World Cup, we won it. So big tick there, but we left ourselves a big uphill task. We started pretty slowly, but they did get the job done. So huge win there. But other ramifications. Well, it's the end of David Warner's international career, I would imagine. I think it's the end of quite a few of the team's international career. And, I think maybe Mitch Marsh's captaincy will be put under the microscope. He didn't perform particularly well with the bat throughout the tournament. He did get his tactics wrong against Afghanistan. Does he have to take the blame for that? I mean, if I don't know who's making those calls about not picking Stark and bowling first, but someone has to take the responsibility for that. And so I think there will be some ramifications. I think we'll see a much younger T20 side. And I'm going to do a proper podcast where we sort of look at the stats and the figures from the World Cup. So I'll do a bit of a deep dive into it. But when I now look back at this World Cup for Australia, to me it'll be a very disappointing campaign, and Australia underperformed. And it's just a bit of a shocker for Australia, for them to be cruising into the Super 8s, to have that game against Afghanistan. And yeah, I think we sort of, was it false hope in the first round, or was it a bit of a smoke screen for what was really going on underneath in that first round for Australia? Because everyone had Australia after the first group as being, one of the favourites to win the competition. But we saw a little bit against Scotland where they dropped catches and they had to chase down that stiff target. That there was a few chinks in the armour, but in the end, Mitch Marsh was given the responsibility to captain the team in the World Cup, and unfortunately, the team wasn't able to get the job done, and they go home eliminated before the semi-final stage again. So look, anyway, that's it. So England out. Sorry, I wish I was saying that. God, Australia out. Can you believe that? No, England are through and we're not. After a week and a half ago, I'm sorry, but we were all wrong. We were all wrong. We were all wrong about the COVID vaccine, and we were all wrong about England. We should have knocked them out against Scotland. I think we should have thrown the game. That's where the juju went bad, as far as I'm concerned, because Australians cannot give England a leg up. But so England are playing India, and I'm really hoping India absolutely towel them up in the semi-final. And then South Africa versus Afghanistan. And I don't want Afghanistan to win anything, so I'm hoping South Africa win that game. And that's hard for me to say. So I'm hoping for a South Africa-India final. I've heard a few pundits say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if South Africa won? No, it wouldn't. Absolutely wouldn't be nice. I enjoy their terrible record in World Cups. If they lose the semi-final to Afghanistan by like one run, will I take some joy in that? Yes, I will. Absolutely will. Anyway, so that's it for me. Australia coming home. Our World Cup campaign is over. That means my, Australian match reports are over. So I'll be recording a proper episode with Damien Watson this week where we look at the World Cup and also look into some other cricket news. But there we go. Australia's World Cup campaign is over. Afghanistan and India go through from our group. That's it from the Cricket Unfiltered podcast.